There's so many missing people of color in the U.S. African Americans remain missing 4 times longer than white Americans. That number is alarming. It's our job to bring them home.
Thank you for calling Black and Missing Foundation.
The police was like, how you know she just ain't leave?
The detective kept saying she ran away. And I'm like, she didn't run away. It was like a punch in the face.
When a Black person is in distress, missing, it's not a big deal to law enforcement because they don't think we have much to lose.
Our community matters.
Absolutely, it matters. This is, to me, one of the most powerful documentary series I've seen in a long time. We have someone I truly admire and respect, and I'm very proud to have worked with her in the past and had her on the show before, and I love the work that she does, and I know if she's attached to it, then something is going to happen. There's going to be impact. This is a conversation we've been having for a while on this show. Tens of thousands of Black girls and women who go missing every year. Last year, that figure was nearly 100,000, yet the case has hardly ever grabbed any national headlines. And so our next guest, broadcast journalist, actress, writer, director, executive producer, I believe I just saw her on Ghost Power Book 2 the other day, giving an Oscar-worthy performance.
Lies.
Right. No. Yes, indeed. True indeed, in true fashion. I want to welcome her back to the show and say thank you to her. The one and only Soledad O'Brien is back with the citizens. Soledad.
Hey, Queen. Nice to talk to you guys. Yeah, I don't know that I put actress on my resume. It still kind of makes me cringe.
Well, no, you did good. I saw you in the scene, and I was like, wow, I'm about to talk to her in a day or two. And I thought it was awesome. But more importantly, I think it's awesome what you're doing with Black and Missing. You know,
oh my God, that foundation is amazing. And those women, Derica and Natalie Wilson, who are sisters-in-law, they're incredible. And we did think, boy, this would be a great documentary if we could embed with them and show the world what they do. And then, of course, I mean, that was 3 years ago when we started this project. And then, of course, you know, sometimes people say to me, well, the timing is so good with all this other coverage of missing white girls. And you're like, yeah, except the timing is always good, you know, because the idea of the missing white woman syndrome, which Gwen Ifill, who was a friend of mine and a correspondent who passed away now several years ago, you know, she really talked about the frenzy that accompanies young, attractive, white, usually blonde women when they go missing, and how little of that energy is put behind missing people of color.
Why is that? You and I work in broadcast journalism. We work for reputable platforms. Why don't we see more coverage about this in your perspective?
I think there's a couple of issues. I think from law enforcement's perspective, there is this sense that people have run away, that they don't necessarily go into it with the same energy. And some of that comes about because they're not getting the same pressure from the media. Why the media? I think a lot of it is just bias. It's who do you think is attractive? Who do you think your audience cares about? Who do you think is your audience? You'd be amazed at the number of times. I mean, I've been in a million conversations where people talk about we. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm an Afro-Latina, so like we are not all we when you're talking about who the audience is. My we is a little bit different than your we. So I think it's bias, right? I think there's a sense that this person is really valuable. She's attractive. It's a good backstory. And this person, you know, so they're missing. Who cares? I don't think it's stated overtly, but I think it's bias. A lack of focus by the media, as you well know, means law enforcement is sometimes much less likely to feel the pressure. And I also think communities have to mobilize and motivate around there's somebody missing and we all have to care about it. And if you don't have a pressure from the community, that pressure could be used to push both the media and law enforcement. So it's kind of a triangle of just feeling like maybe these folks aren't valuable. And then that becomes a slowness to investigate cases, a reluctance to think of someone as anything more than, you know, a runaway. Well, you know, she probably just, you know, moved in with her boyfriend. well, even if you are a runaway, and in many cases it's trafficking, you're not a runaway per se, it's still terrible, and someone should be looking for a young person.
Okay. Tracy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do. Soledad, I'm so happy to be speaking with you. When I think about what you just mentioned with the media's role in this and how, especially last year with our racial reckoning, and we saw everyone trying to, get their D&I in place, et cetera, et cetera. And so when it comes to this case, are you seeing different media entities maybe have internal workshopping, any type of new guidelines, you know what I mean, changes to their code of ethics or just how they're going to be presenting the news to try to reverse their role in this?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I have not seen anything that is specific, but I have seen many more conversations, right? So I think people are beginning to understand, like a lot of things about bias, right? Once someone points it out, you start thinking like, oh, crap, maybe this is something that I'm not doing well. And so I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with folks who are very interested in sort of saying, like, you're right, this is a problem, we need to fix it. But I haven't seen any, specific, hey, here's a new guideline and how we have to think about this. I think it's just people recognizing a blind spot and then understanding. In the documentary, we have a former news president, and he's being asked, why are there so many, we tell the story of a young woman who goes missing at the same exact time as Natalie Holloway. Mm-hmm. And her sister is watching while Natalie Holloway's case is getting all this attention. And people are getting on planes to go to Aruba to help search for Natalie Holloway. I was part of covering that story. And she literally is trying to figure out, can anybody just do a story on this young woman who's important to me, who's Black and who's missing. And the news president who's interviewed says, race is not a factor. Well, that's just bullshit. That's just not true. Let me put it that way. Yeah. So, and I think what ends up happening is people are beginning to recognize that. I thought it was an amazing thing that Gabby Petito's father, and I'm going to misquote him a little bit, but he basically said, you guys should be also helping find the people who are missing and are people of color while they were searching for the body of his own daughter. Even he understood and appreciated all the coverage and the intensity of the search, but felt like other people deserve it too. And so I think when things like that happen, people begin to realize, this is biased and you have to understand why it's happening and then work to stop it.
Yes.
So, Soledad O'Brien is with us. She's the executive producer of the documentary series Black and Missing, which premieres today at 8 p.m. on HBO Max. And citizens, I need you to call up and ask questions the same way you would when we have artists, when we have singers, when we have rappers on. The same enthusiasm we have when we see Drake and Kanye come together, off of some whatever kind of beef they may have had or whatever gossip we may talk about. That same interest, that same engagement you have with us on those topics, I would like for you to have on this topic. Yes. Okay, Black and Missing is premiering today, and it's a 4-part documentary series that follows sisters-in-law Black and Missing Foundation founders Derek and Natalie Wilson, and they fight an uphill battle. And this has been constant, and this has been going on for decades. And so Soledad O'Brien is here with us. We got Joe on the line from the ATL. Joe, Grand Risings. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, Joe.
Bless. Thank y'all for having me on this morning.
Absolutely. You got a comment?
Absolutely. Just as a person of color, of course, it's just always disheartening when we just be slighted. You know what I mean? When these situations arise, and it's not uncommon. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. If y'all just seen the news this year, it's been multiple different investigations of a lot of kids being found, but it's kind of swept under the rug. You know what I mean? I don't feel like it has the same credence as, again, someone not of color. The same situations arise. If it was multiple investigations and they were coming up with, I would assume, a different race of children in the masses that we've been found, I think it'll be a lot more attention drawn to it. So more so, it's what can we do more proactively as a young black man, you know what I mean, with the platform, like what can we do on a day-to-day basis just to shine more light on this?
Such a great question. And I think part of the answer is deciding that it's important. I mean, I always thought it was very interesting that Derica and Natalie talked a lot about the role of the community, too, because the community is what pushes media. You know, sometimes you got to shame people, right, into covering something. Sometimes you got to embarrass them into doing a better investigation if you're talking about law enforcement. So to some degree, I think it's been amazing to see in certain communities that the community really tracks who's missing kind of within the community, and then they do a lot of coverage of it. They do it online. They pepper the news organizations. Some places are really starting to cover these stories, like have a segment literally weekly on who's missing, which is crazy to me, but amazing. I mean, it's sad because you think, gosh, that's a whole lot of people who must be missing, that it's worthy of doing a segment every week, and it is. And so I think that's really happening with the community saying, this is important to us. And then everybody else decides, like, well, shoot, if it's important to them, then I guess it has to be important to us. So I think you could gather people and just start asking about it. Hey, have you guys heard about Jane Doe? She's missing. Have you heard about Jasmine Smith? She's missing. And from this community, and it can be posted on social media. It can be signs can get put up, and you can volunteer with a local organization. Black and Missing is always looking for volunteers. And in Atlanta, sex trafficking is a huge problem. So sometimes people who are missing and run away with their boyfriend are actually being sex trafficked, right? Yeah. I mean, the idea that somehow that's not important enough because they're considered a runaway is horrifying to me. So I think there are lots of things that individual people can do by just asking the questions and pushing people.
Hey, Joe, thanks for your call, man. I hope that was informative for you. You're a citizen, Joe. Thanks for caring. You know, I did a piece years ago on the sex trafficking and involuntary servitude with Viacom, and that was one of the things that we found. A lot of missing women were missing in their neighborhood. They were right there, locked in homes, and weren't being allowed to leave. And the pimp culture played a major role in a lot of missing folks. A lot of girls were being kidnapped and sent overseas. And then once that happens, it's really tremendously hard to track someone down under those circumstances. But a lot of these crimes are taking place right under our noses. Carlos is on the line from Orlando. Carlos, how you doing? Grand Risings.
Hey, Carlos.
How you doing, everybody? Good morning.
Hey,
Good morning.
I got a quick question for Soledad. What do you know about the Ariana DeJesus case out of Philadelphia? She's been missing. Well, actually, she was found dead, and the gentleman, actually, I'm not going to say gentleman, the guy who did it, he's been missing. He's been overseas. He was on the FBI list. I think he was arrested at one point, but then he was let go due to the...
Yeah, I don't know much about the case per se because I haven't covered it, but it's not all that unusual. So I only know what I've read as a sort of a viewer and a listener and a reader as opposed to someone who's reported the story. But listen, I think the details of that case are not all that unusual in a lot of ways. And of course, there was a lot of slowness as well. I mean, I think it fit a lot of the same broad strokes that we see when other young women of color go missing. So, yeah, it's still a mystery, and we know that people of color are 4 times more likely, it takes 4 times longer to close the case to find them than for white people who are missing. So it's a horrific story, of course, but it's also something I think that is not, it's terrible to say this, but it's not that surprising, right? A lot of the details match a lot of the other stories about people of color who've gone missing.
Thanks for your call, Carlos. We got Aaron on the line from Cali. Grand Risings, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Aaron, are
Aaron,
you there?
Grand Rising.
Hey,
Okay.
hey.
Yeah, so my question is to Soledad, have you seen or saw any evidence to the fact that we see a heightened police presence in our communities, yet when you speak on this subject, there's usually no answers?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, when we were shooting this documentary, at one point we asked the patrolmen who were walking down the street in a neighborhood in Baltimore, so have you guys heard about the case of, I forget the name of the young woman who we were asking about. And the police looked at us like they had no idea. And you're like, literally, you are the people who are walking down the street. Like, how would you help find someone who's missing if this case isn't even top of mind for you? And I think therein lies the problem, that police presence has to be around helping the people in the community who live there versus, hey, we're just going to make sure we're policing the community and not making the residents more safe. It was one of the big issues. Derrica Wilson is law enforcement and former law enforcement. And so, she was so mad when she realized the police officers that she was talking to and their leadership, really, where a lot of that comes from, just weren't aware of some of these missing persons cases because they were just not that important. And I think it's a good example of you can't have all these systems operating independently without everybody being concerned. I guarantee you that if you look at the Elizabeth Smart case, everyone in the nation had a good idea of what Elizabeth Smart looked like. And we're constantly thinking about, well, what if I ran into Elizabeth Smart? How would I know? But that is not the case for the young women of color who are missing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And the travesty, too, this is one of the biggest crimes in America to me, is that black women are being targeted for this reason. It's police, part of the reasons, police aren't, paying attention. Is not a priority. We often talk about why we should, pay more attention to who we vote into office, especially when it comes to mayors, judges, district attorneys, and police commissioners in your community. And if you find that the attention on this matter is inadequate, you got to raise some hell. You got to put pressure on them. You got to vote them out of office. It's making it black women are the most unprotected in this country. Obviously, that's why we see all of these cases. And if it wasn't for Black and Missing, this is, a 4-part documentary, but we need something every day, to help solve these crimes, and a lot of it. Go ahead, Soledad.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say there's a reason why predators pick certain people, right?
Yep.
You look for the people who you can get away with it. You look for people who are vulnerable. And I think you're exactly right about that if there's people who are unprotected and that it's going to, the police are going to be slow to respond in an investigation, that people will say, why don't you wait a few days and see if she comes home versus, oh my goodness, could be terrible. Let's investigate immediately. If the media is going to shrug and say, well, look at the neighborhood she lives in. It's not such a safe neighborhood. Or, she's just not that cute. We don't want to put her on TV. And I'll guarantee you, I used to work on a show where we used to look at the book jacket of authors, and determine, are they cute enough to be on our show? Not, is the book amazing? Not,
Wow.
So there is a factor of, do we consider you attractive? And if you're attractive, then that's a plus to being, making air. So, all of those things I think are something, predators are well aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Soledad, how much do you feel like the whole culture of no snitching, do you feel like that has decreased as the numbers of missing Black women has increased, or do you feel like it's the same? How much do you feel like this is a contributing factor?
That's such a great question. And I don't know the answer because we haven't really measured that, right? I just don't know that there's a good data set that can tell you. I think often a bigger issue is less around snitching and more around people just aren't aware. There are neighborhoods that you can walk down and say, do you know the name of this person? Shanice White, do you know where, and have you heard that she's even missing? And people were like, no, they had no idea. So I think it's less of the culture of snitching, like, boy, there's a bunch of people who know and they're not telling, versus people are just unaware. And I think, Black and Missing has done a lot to make organizations, individuals, law enforcement, media aware of this big gap in awareness, if you will.
Right.
Soledad O'Brien is here. Someone was just sending me a article about a on-air personality in the Bay Area, Frank Somerville, who was removed from air.
Oh, yeah, I know Frank.
You know Frank, right?
Yeah, his wife was one of my producers when I worked in San Francisco many years ago now in the 1990s. You saw what happened when he started questioning, because I think there's a lot of this sense of, you have to treat these families very carefully and don't talk about missing white woman syndrome. And listen, I get it. If a family is missing somebody, it's fallacious. I used to think, how did this mom get out of bed? I just can't imagine. I literally cannot imagine. Mm-hmm. But I think what Frank was saying, of course, his daughter is a mixed race woman. I think what he was saying was, we just have to care about other people too. It's not taking away from people who are missing. And again, Gabby Petito's own father at the worst moment in his life was chastising the media. Go and cover these other women too. He wasn't saying, listen, my daughter's story is the most important. And as you guys know, it's a zero-sum game, right? Yeah. If you spend an entire show, an entire week, an entire day covering one person, Elizabeth Smart, Lacey Peterson, then guess what? You don't have space in a broadcast to cover other people. You just don't. It's a zero-sum game. So I thought what Frank did was very brave, and he obviously paid the price for it.
Yeah, they suspended him for also wanting to bring attention to others that are missing, that are of color. My buddy Leonard Ng just sent me this. I'm going to take one more call, Soledad. We got Charisse on the line from Baton Rouge. Grand Rising, Charisse. How you doing?
Hey, Charisse.
Hey, guys. Good Grand Rising to all.
Same to you.
Thank you. I actually had the opportunity to work with Mrs. O'Brien in the beginning of the year on her Disrupt and Dismantle series. And when I got the call, I was ecstatic because I've always been a fan. I'm really just calling to comment on the fact that she never forgets about this community. She's always fighting for us. She's always speaking up for us. And I just want to say thank you and to continue, because we need people like you in the media.
Wow, Charisse, thank you. What a kind thing to say. And listen, it's important to me. It should be important to everybody. It literally should just be important to everybody. You're talking about human beings. It should be important to everybody. So I thank you. I appreciate that. We did a great series for BET, which is rerun on that's been rerun that called Disrupt and Dismantle, that looked at really environmental racism and kind of disrupting and dismantling sort of built-in racist systems, which is, sometimes a hard thing to talk about, but it was a great series. So thank you for all of that anyway, and also thanks for your kind comments. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Charisse. You're a citizen, Charisse.
That's the way to want it.
All right. Soledad, I echo Charisse's sentiments about you. I enjoy your work so much, and I'm always informed when I'm watching what you're doing. And so I want to say continued success, and understand whatever you're doing, this platform is one of your resources. So thank you, and I want to encourage everyone to watch Black and Missing, premiering today at 8 p.m. on HBO Max, a 4-part series. How you spending your holiday, Soledad?
Mm-hmm. So, I don't cook, but I'm hosting Thanksgiving, but I'm sort of like, I make gravy. I hold a glass of wine in one hand, and I make the gravy with the other hand, and then everybody else around me actually makes the food. So it's pretty easy for me, and I just do the cleanup.
Yo, but that's probably the best damn gravy on the East Coast, so I bet it is, right?
Actually, lie, it's really good.
I'm sure it is. Well, have a great holiday, and we want to encourage everybody to watch Black and Missing on 8 p.m. on HBO Max starting today. And we'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Soledad O'Brien, citizens.